New Mexico. Early morning. Kira Langston, a former Air Force tactical analyst, was walking her dogs across the land she legally owned when 6 armed police officers appeared out of nowhere. No sirens, no warnings, just silence. Then guns drawn. She wasn't armed. She didn't flinch. She simply turned her head. Slowly. Behind her, the door to the house creaked open. From the shadows stepped Nova and Brutus, 2 former Warzone rescue dogs, each wearing tactical vests with special ops badges clipped to the front. The 6 officers froze. One of them whispered, "What the hell is this?" No one moved. No one spoke. Only Kira's eyes did the talking. Cold, calm, unshaken, as if she was the one inspecting them. Not the other way around. The air shifted, and from that moment on, this wasn't just a routine check. It was a declaration of war. Kira Langston, 39, had served over a decade in the Air Force's Tactical Analysis Unit. After Operation Baltic Storm, where she barely survived a deadly ambush, Kira left the military with a severe PTSD diagnosis and a string of nameless nightmares. She didn't return to the city. She didn't seek benefits. She didn't do interviews. Instead, she bought an abandoned radar station on the edge of the New Mexico hills, a place with no neighbors, no cell signal, just wind, stone, and a sky wide enough to breathe under. Brick by brick, wire by wire, she rebuilt it with her own hands, turning it into something barely livable, but deeply safe. With her were Nova and Brutus, 2 combat dogs once assigned to search and rescue missions in conflict zones, now officially retired. But unlike people who keep dogs to guard a house, Kira didn't keep them. She lived with them, as equals, as fellow soldiers. And to her, this piece of land, silent, desolate, forgotten by most, was the closest thing to peace a betrayed soldier could ever find. Though she once held a high military rank and had earned medals for saving dozens of lives in combat zones, Kira Langston was never welcomed in the nearest town. They looked at her with a mix of suspicion and disdain, not because of her military past, but because of her skin, her silence, and the 2 dogs in tactical gear that never left her side. Every time she came into town for supplies, the shop clerks always had the same excuse. "We're out of stock." The local bank refused to process her credit paperwork. Once, she was tailed for 12 straight miles by an unmarked police cruiser. Kira didn't speak up, didn't file a complaint, didn't call the press. Instead, she quietly built her own defense system, hidden cameras in the fence, motion sensors, an emergency transmitter linked directly to a veteran support network. She learned to purify water, grow food in a greenhouse, charge power through solar. Not because she wanted to disappear from society, but because society had never truly seen her. And out here, on a stretch of land thick with bias and silence, Kira's quiet wasn't weakness. It was survival, in a form no one ever expected. Monday morning, 5:42 a.m. The sky hadn't fully lightened yet. Fog still clung to the desert rocks out front. A gray SUV and 2 unmarked pickups rolled to a silent stop at Kira's front gate. No sirens, no warrants. 6 men in paramilitary uniforms stepped out. No names, no badges. Leading them, Lieutenant Mason Tripp, a man who'd been investigated 3 times for excessive force against indigenous citizens, and walked free each time due to lack of evidence. He didn't knock. He slammed a fist against the metal gate and barked, "We've received a tip about illegal marijuana cultivation. Open the gate, or we're coming in." No answer. Inside, Kira was making coffee. She'd already seen them through her window-mounted security cam. Every move of theirs tracked and analyzed by software she coded herself. No search warrant, no evidence, no law backed their presence. But Tripp didn't care about the law. He wasn't here to inspect. He was here to send a message. And this time, he thought he'd picked an easy target. He was wrong. Dead wrong. Kira opened the front door and stepped outside, empty-handed, calm, as if this were just another quiet morning. "If you don't have a written search warrant," she said clearly, "I'm under no obligation to comply." Tripp stepped forward, lips curling into a smirk, half mocking, half menacing. "You really think a few legal lines are gonna stop us? You live out in the desert. No one hears you scream out here." Behind him, one of the officers moved toward the fence. Kira didn't flinch, didn't back down. Her right hand slid casually behind her back, resting on a small hidden switch sewn into her cloth waistband. She pressed it. Silently, her alert system kicked into gear. 360-degree surveillance cams spun to life. Encrypted signals beamed to the Argus Circle veteran network. At the same time, she gave a command, barely audible. Brutus stepped out from behind the wall. Two dark shapes, silent and still. Their stance was locked, ready, not a single bark. But their eyes glowed amber behind sensor-enhanced goggles. The silence now wasn't peace. It was a warning. Tripp didn't wait for justification. He barked, "Search the whole perimeter." Start left. Immediately, two officers climbed the fence, mud-caked boots trampling through Kira's herb garden. Mint, chamomile, lavender, plants she grew to calm her nerves, on nights when war memories clawed their way back into her sleep. Another officer stormed straight into the tech station, where she stored data to support veterans with PTSD. He yanked cables, ripped out hard drives, as if they were evidence in a drug raid. But the worst came in one careless stomp. A muddy boot crushed the corner of a small altar. The photo of her 4 fallen teammates from Operation Baltic Storm slipped off the table, shattered against the concrete floor. No one apologized. No one paused, except Logan Diaz, the youngest on the team. He froze in the doorway, eyes wide, staring at the scene unfolding inside. His lips pressed shut. Fingers clenched the grip of his rifle. But he didn't raise it. He knew this was wrong. But around him, boots thudding, drawers flung open, eyes burning with disdain, he stayed silent. That morning, he said nothing. But everything was written in his eyes. And Kira, still in the center of the wreckage, saw it all. Without a word, Kira stepped back into the house, as if she were surrendering. But in reality, it took just 3 steps to unlock her emergency response system. Beneath the kitchen tile, a pressure sensor picked up her footfall and instantly activated an encrypted communication channel with Argus Circle, a covert network of high-tech veterans formerly embedded in national security. Within 90 seconds, footage from a hidden camera along the southern fence, the angle with the clearest view of the officers ransacking and destroying, was transmitted to an independent server. 10 minutes later, a 43-second video went live across defense forums, veteran networks, and Twitter X tagged with a single hashtag, #Veteran Under Siege, a calm black woman, surrounded by armed men. 2 elite service dogs holding their ground, and uniformed officers tearing through her home in silence. The footage hit hard. Major accounts began reposting. The first comments rolled in. "What the hell is happening in New Mexico? This is America?" While Tripp's team still believed they were in control, a wave of outrage had already broken loose, spreading far beyond the edge of the desert. Less than an hour after the first video went live, a Groundwave News SUV barreled across the edge of the desert, kicking up a trail of red dust in its wake. Out stepped Malcolm Duval, a Haitian-American journalist known for reporting from global conflict zones. Now, he specialized in domestic abuses of power. No flak jacket, no boom mic, just smart glasses on his face and a drone controller in hand. As Malcolm approached the gate, an officer stepped in his path, palm raised. "Restricted area. I'm going to have to ask you to turn around." Malcolm didn't stop. He simply said, "Under state law, I have the right to film from open airspace." Then he launched the drone. It shot skyward, spun a clean 360 degrees, and began live streaming. 6 officers in tactical gear stood shoulder to shoulder, weapons aimed at a single unarmed black woman, standing still. Her eyes steady, her hands empty. Malcolm didn't need to narrate. The Flycam's footage streamed directly to Groundwave's platform. Within 15 minutes, over 300,000 views. Within 30, the footage was being reshared by top journalists and elected officials. One caption in particular ignited the firestorm. "Is this how America treats those who once protected it?" As the drone camera continued its slow, silent orbit, capturing every tense angle of the standoff, Kira lifted 2 fingers to her lips and let out a low, short whistle, barely audible over the desert wind. But Nova and Brutus heard it. They emerged from the shadows beside the house. No barking, no growling, just silent steps forward, positioning themselves between the officers and the front door. Backs straight, heads high. On their black and gray tactical armor, glinting in the early sun, was a circular insignia edged in silver. Timberline Task Force, Federal K-9. Rescue Unit A classified program once deployed in wartime, dismantled years ago for being too difficult to control. One officer, the oldest of the 6, froze. His eyes locked on the emblem. He muttered under his breath, "Holy shit, those are Timberline dogs." And just like that, the energy shifted. No more barking commands. No one moved forward, because they knew. These dogs weren't like anything they'd trained with. They didn't need to bark to intimidate. They had saved lives, and taken them. In the harshest, most unforgiving conditions imaginable. Not to attack, but to protect the woman who once stood, like them, on the line between life and death. Nova and Brutus's presence brought the officers to a halt, but to Trip, it looked like an opening. He yanked his gun from its holster, raised it to eye level, and shouted, "You are in possession of undeclared biological weapons. I'm ordering you to surrender, now." A few of the officers glanced at each other. Biological weapons. That phrase wasn't in any briefing, and truth be told, there had never been a briefing. They had no warrant, no real authority. But Trip didn't care about legality. He cared about domination. He stepped forward, gun still aimed. Kira didn't flinch. Instead, she turned slightly, toward the drone still hovering in the sky. Sunlight glinted off the lenses of her glasses. "These are therapy dogs," she said, loud and steady. "Former combat rescue unit. And now, state police are using the very dogs that once saved American soldiers as justification to illegally raid a veteran's home." She lifted her chin and pointed directly at the drone. "The whole country is watching, Lieutenant Trip. Every word you say, every step you take. The question is, do you have the courage to keep going when justice itself is recording your every second?" The air thickened, and for the first time, Trip hesitated. The sound of a 7th engine rumbled from the distance. Red desert dust rising in waves. A county SUV rolled onto the scene. From it stepped a woman with steel-gray hair, a sturdy frame, and eyes so deep they seemed to see through every layer of deception. Sheriff Dolores Hart, Cherokee descent, known across the state for one principle: the law is not a weapon for the powerful, it's a shield for the powerless. She didn't rush. She didn't yell. She simply held a tablet, playing back the live stream from the drone and hidden cams. Her gaze swept across them all. Tripp, Diaz, each officer in turn, and finally, Kira. "Lieutenant Tripp," she said, her voice low but cutting through the morning air like thunder. "You've just violated 3 statutes: unlawful search, destruction of private property, and use of force without legal authorization." Tripp opened his mouth to protest, but Hart raised a hand. "I'm not asking for explanations. I'm asking you to lower your weapon. Now." Then she turned to 2 other officers behind her. "Detain Tripp's entire team. They're subjects of an internal investigation." No one argued. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. Not through bullets, but through the presence of someone who still understood what justice really meant. The moment Tripp's team was detained, Kira stepped back inside her home and opened the control interface to her internal drone surveillance system. The screen lit up with clipped segments from motion-triggered cameras. Not for live streaming, but archived to an independent hard drive for later verification. One clip stood out. Crystal-clear footage showed, while chaos erupted in the front yard, an officer, his profile unmistakable, slipped into the storage shed. From his pocket, he pulled out a small white plastic bag and tucked it deep into the back corner, beside the solar power units. Kira played the footage in front of Sheriff Hart. The air went still. No one breathed, no denials, no explanations. The image was too clear, too damning. Logan Diaz stood frozen, then stepped forward. He pulled a folded slip of paper from his chest pocket, handwritten, 3 lines. "Order from Tripp, target, Langston. Clear the land. Transfer to Frontier Developments before end of quarter." Sheriff Hart took the note, her jaw clenched tight. "This wasn't a mistake," she said, voice cold as steel. "This was a coordinated land grab, and now it's going public." Kira said nothing, but for the first time that day, her eyes carried something new. Faith. That justice might finally have a fighting chance. The news spread faster than anyone expected. Within 24 hours, the footage Kira released had been shared over 1 million times. Those thought long removed from the front lines, veterans of Iraq, Syria, Kosovo, began quietly arriving at the old radar station. They didn't come armed. They came with unit jackets, veteran IDs, and one unshakable belief: if someone like Kira could be crushed by the system, then no one was safe. They pitched tents, organized rotating watches, formed a living barricade between justice and a system gone rotten. Above them, Malcolm Duvall's drone floated endlessly, broadcasting live coverage for hours on end, becoming the nation's unblinking eye. At the same time, civil rights attorney Celia Grant, who had famously won a landmark racial profiling case in Arizona, formally filed a federal lawsuit against the county government. Attached was hard evidence, supplied by Logan Diaz. Within 6 hours, the U.S. Attorney's Office investigation into abuse of power and the suspicious ties between local law enforcement and Frontier Developments, a major real estate conglomerate. And just like that, a new alliance began to form, not from bullets, but from courage, and the right people standing together at the right moment. That night, just as the radar station's perimeter lights dimmed into power-saving mode, a group of 4 figures emerged from the tree line, wearing local firefighter uniforms, masked, carrying gas canisters and lock-picking tools. They moved without a sound, no flashlights, no voices. They cut through the northern fence, where no guards were posted, only a small transformer hub powering the entire electrical system. Their objective was clear: sabotage the power grid, cause a short circuit, blame it on a technical malfunction. But what they didn't count on was Brutus. The loyal black dog detected the subtle shift in movement. The second one of them opened the power box. In a flash, Brutus lunged and yanked a red cord hidden beneath the gutter lining. It triggered Kira's custom-built internal fire safety system. Sprinklers blasted a heavy stream of water directly onto the transformer. The gasoline they'd poured never stood a chance. Another man raised a lighter, aiming to hurl it toward the herb garden. But Nova struck first. In a blur, she leapt, clamped onto his wrist, and slammed him to the ground. The entire incident was captured by infrared cameras, wide-angle shots and close-ups, leaving no room for doubt. County police arrived 11 minutes later, but by then, the fire had failed to ignite. The flames never came. But the crimes? They lit up the night sky. Logan Diaz didn't sleep that night. He knew. The moment he handed that note to Sheriff Hart, he had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. And he was right. Early the next morning, when Logan stepped into his garage to head to work, 3 men were already waiting. A fist slammed into his gut. Another hurled him shoulder first into the wall. No one said a word, but he recognized them instantly. 2 had been part of Tripp's squad. The third wore a maintenance uniform, just a disguise. "You want to play hero?" one of them hissed. "Delete that drive, or you won't get a second chance." But Logan wasn't carrying it. As they shoved him to the ground, he seized the opening, rolled hard to the side, kicked one in the knee, and bolted out the side door. His concrete-soaked boots couldn't stop him. Blood dripped from his lip, but his grip never loosened, around a tiny USB stick tucked inside a matchbox. It held the footage, the recording of Tripp giving the order to burn it all down. 3 hours later, Logan handed it to Malcolm Duvall at a secure location. Groundwave uploaded the file directly to their private satellite feed, and when the footage aired, America watched, in real time, Mason Tripp, face fully visible, leaning in close and whispering, "Make it burn. Blame the short. Simple." Those words lit the match that burned down every escape he thought he had. Less than 48 hours after the footage of Tripp was broadcast nationwide, black SUVs bearing the words Federal Bureau of Investigation rolled into a small town, long used to hiding behind comfort zones. 6 federal agents stepped out. No sirens, no warnings, just a signed federal warrant in hand. First stop, the county sheriff's office and the private residence of Mason Tripp. Within 3 hours, they had seized personal hard drives, department servers, and 2 encrypted phones. Then came the bombshell. A series of emails between Tripp and the legal counsel for Frontier Developments, the real estate firm aggressively buying up land around the old radar site. The language was blunt. Tripp had accepted $120,000 in strategic consulting fees in exchange for applying legal pressure on hard-to-negotiate landowners, specifically targeting black residents, veterans, and anyone without legal representation. At the same time, the FBI, in coordination with the State Attorney General's office, launched a sweeping investigation into what they called land seizure policing tactics, a sophisticated system of forced property acquisition, masked as lawful enforcement. Every member of Team Flint, Tripp's former squad, was suspended and taken into custody. The system had cracked, and this time, there was no shield big enough to cover the truth. As news of the bribery and land coercion scandal broke wide open, a wave of outrage swept through the borderland communities. People who had once stayed silent out of fear finally began to speak. Ms. Rose Mendez, 72, revealed she'd been pressured by police into signing away her inherited farm for 1/10 of its actual value. Jamal, a young auto shop owner, said he'd been threatened with building code violations unless he vacated within the month. One by one, These isolated victims began to find each other. And what formed was something entirely new. From the very site that once served as Kira's solitary radar outpost, a new organization emerged, Guardline, an alliance of veterans, local residents, and civil rights attorneys, with a mission not just to fight back, but to build a long-term legal shield. Kira, with her military and tech background, became the lead technology advisor. She worked with coders to develop a wearable wristband, AI integrated to detect abusive behavior, send emergency geolocation, and upload encrypted data directly to legal hubs. Guardline wasn't born to protest. It was born so no one would ever again stand alone against corrupted power. And this time, the people had something they never had before: themselves. By March of the following year, the federal courthouse in Santa Fe was packed, wall to wall. Tripp, the former members of Team Flint, and 2 senior officials from the County Land and Development Office stood inside the defendant's box. They faced a total of 14 criminal charges, including property extortion, abuse of power, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and attempted arson. The jury deliberated less than 2 days. The verdict: guilty, on every count. The sentencing document ran over 200 pages, but its final line was brutally simple: no one stands above the law, especially those entrusted to enforce it. At the same time, public pressure mounted on the state legislature. They responded, passing a sweeping reform known as the Civil Protection Equity Act, barring the use of militarized or paramilitary police forces in civilian matters without independent judicial oversight. It marked the first time in the state's history that a coalition of civilians, veterans, and attorneys had successfully restructured the balance of power through evidence and solidarity. Kira Langston was invited as the honorary speaker at West Point Military Academy to speak on the power of discipline, technology, and strategic silence. She walked onto the stage. No uniform, no medals, no fanfare, just her eyes, sharp as the day she stood alone in a circle of guns. Months after the trial, the old radar station, once the site of siege, violence, and national media frenzy, had become something entirely different. With help from veterans, engineers, and nonprofit groups, Kira Langston transformed the entire property into a sanctuary called Echo Haven. Not just a place to rest, but a living symbol of recovery and rebuilding. Echo Haven operated as an integrated healing center. There was an open-air meditation space set against the desert sky, therapy rooms where dogs like Nova and Brutus assisted in PTSD treatment, and most notably, a legal defense lab, where citizens were taught how to use simple tech to document, defend, and legally resist when their civil rights were threatened. Here, veterans and civilians learned to heal, not by forgetting, but by facing the truth. Kira took no salary. She lived as a quiet guardian, walking the halls, resting a hand on the shoulders of newcomers, and saying softly, "You're not alone anymore." Echo Haven was never just a place. It stood as a living reminder that justice doesn't end in a courtroom. It begins again, in every heart that's been touched by kindness. On the day of sentencing, sunlight poured across the stone steps of the federal courthouse. Kira Langston, in a plain gray shirt, a folder of legal documents in hand, walked slowly toward the witness stand. At her sides, Nova and Brutus kept pace, as if still on duty. No one spoke as she passed. A strange stillness settled over the gallery, not out of fear, but out of respect. That image, a black woman, no makeup, no medals, but eyes unwavering and spine unbent, was captured and published across the front pages of 5 major outlets: the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian US, ProPublica, Time Magazine, The headline was simple. She stood alone, so we wouldn't have to. No shots were fired, no hateful words exchanged. But through strategy, intellect, and an unshakable belief in justice, Kira dismantled a system that once seemed untouchable. She didn't fight against the law. She forced it to remember why it existed in the first place. To protect, not to threaten. And because of that, Kira wasn't just a veteran. She became a living reminder that justice doesn't begin in a courtroom. It begins with one person brave enough to say, "Enough."